Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Monday Night Conscious Community class with me, Matthew Brownstein, streaming live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. This Monday Night Conscious Community class is dedicated to the title you'll see on the screen, How to Deal with Difficult Relationships. So this was a request by someone saying, can you talk about this topic? So if you're struggling right now with any difficult situation with another person, I really hope this class will benefit you in the future when you're dealing with a difficult situation, because they happen, right? I hope this class will benefit with you. We're going to talk primarily about a significant other type of relationship, like a significant relationship, one that perhaps you could actually not be in. But it's not always like that, right? Some relationships you're just not getting out of, and others might be smaller and the talk isn't as relevant. But hopefully tonight, when we go into 5 tips on, well, what if you stay in the relationship? What if you can't leave the relationship? What can you do? Hopefully those 5 tips will help. And then the idea of, well, what if you leave the relationship? Then there'll be 5 tips of what to do if you decide to get out of it. If you're wondering, well, should I stay or should I go? Go back and watch my last class, which was called How to Make Better Decisions, right? So this isn't really about helping you to decide, should you stay in the relationship or should you go? That'll be up to you in your decision-making process. But if you decide to stay, 5 major tips on how to make things better. And then if you're like, this is too much, you are free, and really more free than I think we sometimes acknowledge and realize, because you might be like, yeah, but I've been in this marriage. And it's like, nobody said you had to do anything, right? So I'd like everybody tonight who's listening to consider the idea that freedom is really real and really important, and you don't have to remain in situations that are just not pleasant or not tolerable. However, I do honor you're not getting rid of your children, right? You're not getting rid of your parents. There are certain things, certain relationships that are going to stick. So it'll be up to you if you choose to stay or go, but either way, they're going to be relationships that you maintain, and hopefully this class will help you to do those better, to enjoy those more. All right, so just a quick introduction. These are the Conscious Community classes. I've been doing them since about 2012. There's well over 500 hours now of material, and you can find those archives at instituteofhypnotherapy.com. We have, and this class is somewhat based on it, a life mastery course coming up this weekend. It's only $99 for a whole day with me, and we work as a workshop model to help you to achieve success in every aspect of your life. If you haven't done this kind of work, if you have bigger vision goals, if you want success in everything that you do, really consider investing in this day with me. When we talk about relationships, that's a major life category that we focus on in the Life Mastery course. And to not have only loving and harmonious relationships, to me, means something is off in your life. Every category of your life can be wonderful. It doesn't always appear to be the case because of the way the world is and the way people are, or the way people made the world. But we are still extremely powerful beings. And when you align your mind in the right way, you can absolutely harmonize every aspect of your life. So that's an invitation. And a lot of what we're doing in this month is dedicated to that. Next month's classes, all of August, will be dedicated to A Course in Miracles. So I hope you'll join me for those as well. All right, so here we are. Should I stay or should I go? I think that was a song. So 5 tips for staying or keeping. So it doesn't mean when I say staying, it just might mean keeping, right? So whatever is appropriate in your life, right? If you have a colleague and it's not about leaving, you can't leave that person, well, then apply the staying and keeping philosophy. If you're like, I'm going to go or I'm going to end this, then you'll apply the going and ending philosophy. So again, up to you, not a place the class isn't about making the decision tonight. But either way, the principle should benefit you. All right, so number 1 has a few ideas to it. And a lot of what we'll cover is taught in our state licensed hypnotherapy trainings. So those of you who are students can hopefully apply these teachings and maybe apply them better. So tip 1 on staying. You must, and I'm conscious of using the word must, but if you want to have a harmonious relationship with another person, you must keep rapport. There must be good communication. we can take responsibility for that by using our reflective listening skills. The beauty of listening really well in your relationships is that if it's disharmonious, the other person probably doesn't have a need being met. They don't feel heard. They don't feel fulfilled. If they keep repeating themselves to you and they're being like more and more aggressive or, just challenging to be with, maybe they just haven't been heard yet. If you have a difficult relationship with a child and staying is the only option, right? You're not going to end that. So what do? Really consider being more yin. So in Taoist philosophy, we have yin and yang. Yang is the more forceful, more powerful, more even sometimes aggressive type of energy. Doesn't have to be, but you can imagine that kind of energy. There are different ways to deal with that. You can meet force with force, right? You can get more yang and they can be more yang and you can fight it out in the winter, right? But there's nobody who wins in that model. Yin principles of leadership, yin principles of martial arts, right, involve yielding, right? I'm a Tai Chi practitioner. So if you come at me with force, I'm just going to yield out of the way, right? By having my feet solid and rooted in the earth, but my upper extremities extremely limber and flexible, lets me yield. The more conscious force tends to win. And again, what does win mean? Ideally, a loving and harmonious relationship, or at least your happiness and your fulfillment, one way or another. So when we learn good listening principles, principles, we become the more conscious force. In neurolinguistic programming, one of the presuppositions is the more flexible element is the controlling element of a situation. So are you more conscious than the person that you're trying to have a better relationship with? Are you more flexible? Are you bringing in skill sets that maybe they're not? Because if the goal, and we'll get to this again, but I hope you hear me repeatedly saying, it must be loving and harmonious. So if you're part of our team on a hot education group or any of our branches, the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy, everyone on my team knows it must be loving and harmonious. About a month ago, I remember a meeting where two of my staff members were butting heads a little bit. And then one said, Matthew, can you chime in here? I'm like, guys, if it's not loving and harmonious, it's just not happening. I would encourage everybody here tonight who's listening, if you haven't already, make that a high standard in your life. It just must be loving and harmonious. The reason it's so important is the power of intention. If it's been your intention to just, deal with mediocrity, to just deal with drama, to just put up with things that are not pleasant, it doesn't have to be that way. There is another way to be. And again, we'll talk about 10 major ways to look at it tonight. The first one, though, is to put you in the driver's seat by encouraging you to be more yin, more soft, more yielding, more flexible. How do we do that with actual conscious techniques, active listening skills? The first one we teach in our school is reflective listening. So again, a lot of our students, of course, will know this. It's one of the most primary skills that we offer, but it's a good reminder, and also some of you just don't know. One of the most powerful things you can do in reestablishing rapport is to validate another person's feelings. Okay, so what is rapport? Well, in hypnotherapy, we can only give suggestions when we have rapport. Right, so if you have a child and you're saying, clean your room, difficult relationship, he's not doing it, right? Well, you don't have rapport. So what is that? It's really rooted in a sense of trust, commonality, where people feel heard and validated and listened to. So even if you have a child who's been really young and they're in their own head and they're doing their own thing, how do you get them to do what you want them to do, even just using these listening skills? If you jump ahead to the bottom of the slide, you'll see the term pacing and leading, but specifically the term pacing. You want to learn to pace someone's reality to get rapport with them so then you can guide them, that you can have a conversation, that you can make things happen. So always consider your goal is loving and harmonious. Your goal is rapport. Again, rapport has a lot to do with trust and commonality. When people see you as a threat, it's not easy to have rapport with them. So the more we can actually step back and get quiet and just listen to them, this is assuming you're able to talk to the person, right? There are some assumptions here because I don't know your specific situation or situations you'll get into. But when you have the opportunity, just get quiet and listen. Instead of needing to be right, instead of needing to make your point, just get rid of your personal self. Don't worry about your personal self right now. We'll talk about the personal self tonight, and it can be a huge trap to your success because while you think you're so entitled to your own opinions, and well, what if you were a deep meditator and that personal self just wasn't there? Right? So these models that I pull from come largely from studying enlightened masters and saying, what is it like inside of them? The great ones, they've dissolved their personal self. They've dissolved their ego. So there's no one to butt heads with them because they don't have a head. They don't have an ego. They don't have a separate self. These principles, therefore, are rooted in that idea that if you're very empty, very open, very yin, very receptive, then you can hold space for the other person. So when we do active listening, when we do reflective listening, we hear what they say and we simply reflect it back to them. Now we're pacing their reality. Okay, I hear that you're upset. Yeah, I hear that you don't like that I did that. I hear that you're, right? Just let them know that they are heard. You don't have to sound like a parrot or a robot. You can find very creative ways to say, let me see if I understand what you're saying. It seems like you're telling me that you don't like this when this is happening. And do I understand you? Leave out the condescending, leave out the judging, leave out feeling that you're superior or better. We come to a model of equality because in clarity, you see that we're all equals, and letting go of your personal need to be right. Just work to understand that person. So reflecting is just taking the synopsis of what was just said to you and feeding it back by checking for clarity. It's a great way to return to rapport. And again, a lot of you may know the skill sets if you're graduates of our school, but you're not necessarily using them all the time because we forget this stuff. We might use it in our professional relationships. We're not necessarily using it with our significant other. Why not let the person you're supposed to care about the most in the world really let them know that they're heard? And even if they know it's a technique, everybody I've ever been in a relationship with knows that I know these skill sets. Our staff will use it on each other, right? Our maiden lead instructor, Danny Fox, in a lot of meetings, she'll say, let me use one of the most valuable skill sets that I've gotten through this school. Matthew, what I hear you saying is, right? And then you just reflect it back in creative, loving, not robotic, not parroting type of ways. The reflecting and letting people know they're heard is not always enough. The other major skill set is empathic listening. Feel what the person's feeling when they're communicating. If something's difficult, be willing to bring it to consciousness. So because you may have set the intention for loving and harmonious, that means the moment it's getting out of harmony, or if it's just out of harmony, schedule some time to talk. We'll talk a little bit tonight about assertiveness principles. And it's not saying, look, you and I need to sit down and talk. It's, hey, honey, maybe this is a text or an email. I've felt that there's some disharmony between us. I felt there's some conflict, right? It might be obvious, right? But, hey, something doesn't seem quite right. When could we sit down and have a time to talk about it, right? Don't corner them. Don't trap them. Don't make them have to do it. Like your son comes home from school. He's not doing his homework. And we're going to talk about this now, young man. When would be a good time for us to talk about this? What's implied is you're going to talk about it. The question just is when, right? So setting up a time to talk to someone. Anyway, when you do, you're going to be more of a listener, not so much a talker. You're going to reflect back what you hear them saying, and then you're going to reflectively, empathically reflect back what they're saying. The empathic part is the emotional part. It's where you validate someone's feelings. So let's say, I know my audience is largely women, but let's say you're a man and you're talking to a woman. It doesn't matter gender and everything, just people are talking to people. But just if we're visualizing something, a man's talking to a woman, instead of mansplaining, right? Instead of talking over someone, instead of trying to be right, What would it be like to just say, I hear that you're sad, right? Quite often when a woman is saying, I'm not feeling good about this, the men are going to their head, to their intellect. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. When a relationship is difficult, it means on the subconscious level, the feeling level, the emotional level, somebody's not having their needs met. Somebody's not feeling okay. The most powerful thing, whether you're man, woman, or other, so if you're a person, what you can do for the other person is to drop to your heart, so below your shoulders, above your waist. Feel what they're telling you without your personal self in the way. Even if you did something really wrong and they have every reason to be angry, I hear you saying that you're really angry with me. I hear that you're really upset with me. That's just a first step. But again, remember, if you've got a difficult relationship, go yin, go quiet, go soft, go gentle, get rid of your personal self and just validate what you hear them saying. When you do that, to drop down to that bottom line again, you start pacing their reality. Pacing essentially is to come into rapport with them by kind of being like them. Doesn't mean if they're yelling, you are yelling. It means you're in the same zone, right? If, there's all these mass shootings now, and if somebody came up to you and said, yeah, I was just involved in one of those, you wouldn't be like, well, I'm having a great day. You drop down and be like, well, I'm really sorry to hear that, right? You would feel what they're saying, and you would honor that that person is in some kind of pain. Even if you're in pain, your significant other did something that really hurt you. You can get to that later. I'm just saying now, one of the first steps to reestablishing any type of rapport is this skill set: reflective, empathic listening. I hear that you're angry. I hear that you're sad. I hear that was devastating. When we pace someone, we can actually get into a place where we can check for rapport. We can know that we have it. There are two ways to know. Like, when do you have rapport? Because once you do, you can start leading. All right, so I'll get back to how do we check for rapport. But pacing is to come into their reality, build rapport, reestablish some kind of communication, some kind of harmony, and then you can lead. Where are we leading? Back to loving and harmonious, right? Or at least, because we're having a conversation now, maybe towards splitting up. But at least there's some sense of talking because you're willing to listen. How do we know when we have rapport so we can start to lead towards something better? One is you just feel it. You just know it, right? If you've ever met like a salesperson and you just walk in the store and like, oh my God, I'm hitting it off with this person. This is awesome. It's that hitting it off feeling. It's just, wow, communications are going well. I'm telling you, once you say to someone, wow, I hear that you're really angry with me. They're like, yes, you just didn't acknowledge it. It's like, oh, I hear you. I really hear you. I'm telling you, it's like you can't remember that enough when it comes to reestablishing rapport. Once the rapport is reestablished, then you can start leading. Now, these are more advanced skills, but I'll tell you a quick story in this one point, which I do tell in the school. There was a king and a queen, and they had a son, and the son, who's a prince, decided that he was a turkey. Turkeys don't wear clothes, and turkeys don't eat royal meals. So the turkey boy jumps under the table naked and would only eat floor scraps. Nobody could get him out from under the table. Finally, with all these people who tried, some wise man came down from the mountains and said, oh, I can get him out from under the table. The man takes off his clothes, which is a bit odd, actually, when you think about the story. But the point of the story is he gets under the table, being just like the boy, and he says, well, who are you? And the man's like, well, who are you? He's like, no, well, who are you? He's like, well, I'm a turkey. He goes, oh, I'm a turkey too. And so they sit down there just being naked, which is, I know, weird, as the story goes, and they're just eating floor scraps. The point of the story is the wise man was harmonizing with the person he wanted to build rapport with. Once he paced his reality long enough, then the wise man snaps his fingers and a pair of pants appear. Try saying that 5 times quickly. A pair of pants appear. The boy's like, oh, I don't know. He goes, no, it's okay. We can be turkeys and still wear pants. He didn't just try to get him out back at the table eating like a prince. He took one step. Then after a few days of just wearing pants, snaps his fingers and shirts appear. I don't know, says the boy. No, it's okay. You can still be a turkey and wear a shirt. And then he just kept taking him through stages, eventually to eating a decent meal under the table. And then once they were wearing royal clothes under the table, he said, wouldn't you like to have a great meal up at the table? And that's how they got to the final result. You have to know what the final result is to properly lead someone. So again, if loving and harmonious is your standard and you will not live a life without loving and harmonious relationships, then that's where you're leading people to. That's win-win. We always want to consider win-win harmonious models, right? Winning is not that you made your point and they feel bad, right? A lot of male-female relationships go that way, right? Where he won and he told her how it should be and she just quietly accepts it. But that leads to passive aggressive and, not healthy, right? So anyway, that's tip number 1. And it involves that you're intentionally staying. Tip 2, intending you're staying or maintaining the relationship. This relates to our Life Mastery course. Establish your highest priorities. For me, and you can think about for you, you are your highest priority. And we'll come back to that if you decide to leave a relationship, that's a major restructuring principle. You are your highest priority. So even though the first slide was kind of let go of your sense of personal self, your personal self is really kind of a false self, the ego. Your real self, I'm going to say, and you can disagree if you like, your real self is spirit, right? Your real self is, I don't want to say you are spirituality, right? But spirituality is the highest priority, being in touch with who you are as spirit. Like, why? Well, because you are peace, you are love, you are joy, you are tapped in and connected. Well, I hope you're tapped in, but you're connected, whether you know it or not, to the whole universe. You're part of a oneness, which is always good to remember, whether you call that God or whatever, right? There is something bigger than just you. And no matter what, being tapped into the Tao, into the now, into reality is so valuable. So prioritizing your spirituality, your mental emotional health, right? Your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, your head and your heart, but again, your mental and emotional health and well-being, prioritizing that says, I want to be peaceful and happy and okay inside. You also want to consider prioritizing your physical health, right? So if a relationship is stressing you out, it is compromising your highest principles. And again, we'll talk about assertiveness training tonight, but if relationship is your highest priority, then you will sacrifice yourself for the sake of the relationship. That's not good for anybody. So consider restructuring your priorities. You are the most important person. In a temple with pillars, you don't want to be leaning as one pillar on the other pillar, trying to hold it up or hoping it holds you up. You should be your own strong pillar. That's the way to make the temple as strong as possible. As each pillar is responsible for its own weight. In A Course in Miracles, it says your only responsibility is to accept the atonement, the at-one-ment, for yourself. Meaning until you come back to your wholeness, you haven't done your true mission, right? So prioritizing yourself raises your self-esteem. It lets you set healthy boundaries. It makes assertiveness training real because there's something to assert for, right? Like, I'm valuable, I'm important, I'm worthy and deserving of love and respect. If you don't have that type of high self-esteem, then you might be suffering from DMS, doormat syndrome, right? So people are walking all over you. It might be because subconsciously your inner child is prioritizing the relationship more than yourself. Think about what it's like when you're 5 years old. Are you learning about your spirituality, your mental, emotional health, and your physical health? Think about somebody who is abused in any way. What do they conclude about themselves? I'm not good enough. I'm not important. I'm not valuable. I am stupid. I am powerless. I am trapped. I am helpless. And what does that person want? Just for the other person to be nice, right? Just stop abusing me. Just be my friend or just love me. Because that's such a priority for the subconscious wounded inner child, most of us are in that default mode. Before any next relationship event, just as soon as you can, go through, and if you don't know how to do it, again, join me this weekend for the Life Mastery Workshop. Get clear on your priorities. But I can tell you, I will always advocate for three major top priorities: spirituality, mental, emotional health, physical health, because we're prioritizing, you. There's a story in Dan Millman's book, I forget which one of Dan Millman's writings. It's a story of a father and daughter who are part of a circus act, and they realize, oh, our act depends on each other. So the father says to the daughter, okay, because we're so dependent on each other for our act, I will take care of you. I will look over you. I'll watch out for you. I'll be sure you're okay. And you look after me and you take care of me. And the daughter, who is wiser, said, no, Dad, only I can take care of me. Only you can take care of you. Her ability to assert her truth came from that place of high self-esteem, high self-worth, honoring that in the temple, the pillars need to support their own weight, that your responsibility is to accept oneness for yourself. So if you reprogram yourself that I am my highest priority, which is the most selfless thing you can do, because now you're whole and complete and you have something to give to others. So number one, on this slide, establish your priorities. Number two is having that heart-to-heart talk, but doing it where you have relationship properly prioritized, right? So it's like, honey, I really do love you and I respect you and I love this relationship. However, don't say but. Don't say you're wonderful, but, right? When you say but, you negate everything you said before but. You're such a great person, but, okay, so don't say but. If you're going to transition, consider words like however, or a better word is and. I love this relationship, and I've come to realize I love myself. So that just leads to the idea of a heart-to-heart. So ask for that. Say, I'd like us to really just sit down, have a heart-to-heart. Again, you carve out time respectfully, like you can say, I really want us to sit down and have this talk. When would be a good time for us to have this talk? What's a good time for you? Right? Don't just do it like when they're rushing off to work or something. It's conscious communication. I would like for us to sit down and have a heart-to-heart. Now, to understand, well, where's that going to go? Why are we doing that? It goes to the model we teach in our advanced hypnotism training and in our neurolinguistic programming training, the model of core transformation. In this model, there are two essential questions that you ask. One is, what would feel even better? That can be helpful in relationships for sure, but we're not quite at that stage yet where we're going to say what would feel even better, because the relationship still feels kind of crummy, right? So saying, well, what would feel even better isn't necessarily going to get you where you want to go yet. However, the other question is, what is your highest intention? You have to be conscious of how and when you ask this, but number one, establish it in yourself. If you are not clear on your highest intention, you will be asking for things that people can't even necessarily give you. So if you want love, nobody can actually give you that. Love is an inner feeling. We find it within. So if you realize, just ask, like, what is my highest intention? People start with things. My highest intention is to get a new house. My highest intention is to get a new job. My highest intention is to get a new bicycle. Like, why would you want something outside of you? Because you think it's going to give you a certain feeling. Once you catch on to that we want things that give us good feelings, well, you don't need the thing to get the good feeling, right? So then in core transformation, we realize, oh, I just want good feelings. So then what's your highest intention? Well, I just want to be happy. I just want to be peaceful. I just want to feel safe. But now you want to ask yourself, why do you want those feelings? From things to feelings to states of being. From things to feelings to states of being. You want a state of being. You want to be the thing called peace. You want to be the thing called joy. You want to be the thing called love. So really what you're looking for, no matter what, is that feeling, right? It's like, why would you want a harmonious relationship? Because it doesn't feel good inside when it feels bad, right? You don't want to feel bad. Realize your highest priority is love, peace, joy, and that feeling of oneness where like, wow, like I'm in the present moment and reality is beautiful. Of Course in Miracles says there's nothing, the phrase is the wholly satisfying nature of reality. If you're a meditator and you're right in the present moment, you know what you're looking for. And what you're looking for is actually right here now. It's not in that other person. It's in you. We all know this, but we don't tend to live it, right? But if you get clear now to say, my highest intention is inner peace. Now, when you're having the heart-to-heart with the person and you're pacing and leading towards what? Towards peace. So once you answer the question in yourself, what is my highest intention? Now you could ask the other person at the right time, and your inner guidance will tell you like, ooh, this is going to break rapport, right? If I say, honey, what's your highest intention right now? With that tone of voice, it's going to create more friction. But if you're like, and you can learn about conscious communication, making I statements. So that's just one basic principle. Own it. Say I. Don't say you. Honey, I have been doing a lot of inner work. I've been going through a hypnotherapy school, right? I'm really reconsidering my priorities, and you're very valuable to me. I'm learning I'm very valuable to me too. I'm learning I just want inner peace. I just want to be happy. I just want to feel love inside of me. That's my highest intention. I wonder if we can, so again, you have to find a way to pace into this, but eventually, I wonder if we could explore your highest intentions. What do you want most? And if you really, really mean that without technique, people should find that a rapport builder. Honey, what do you want most? But again, don't make it confrontative, because when you hit their ego, it causes more problems. But once there's enough openness, then what is your highest intention? If they say, well, I just want you to clean the house better. The core transformation technique says, well, why do you want that? Like, you could reflect back. I respect that. I respect you want me to clean the house better. Doesn't mean you're going to agree to it. You're just reflecting back what they said. You can agree on probability or possibility, it's called. It's like, well, I could see how you would want that. You're not saying you're going to do it. Doesn't mean they're right or it's appropriate, but I could see this is what you're saying that you want. Can I ask respectfully, why do you want that? Then the way we keep doing core transformation is if they don't say peace, love, joy, bliss, oneness, we'll keep questioning until they admit that. The point is, and again, you don't want to challenge the other person, but you want to get to the place where you're saying, I just want peace and love. And they're saying, I just want peace and love. If you both want the same thing, it's very easy to reconcile. The problem is you're usually arguing at lower levels. Well, I want the electric lawnmower. Well, I want the gas lawnmower. Oh my God, like, what do you guys really want? Right? Why are you fighting over a lower level decision? In truth, there shouldn't be any conflict, right? So if you're arguing where it's divisive, you're in the ego and you're caught up in time and space. Core transformation can take us, and again, the responsibility is for you to do that in yourself, to that higher space. What is your role? Pace and lead them there. Well, what if they're not going there? What if they can't go there? What if eventually they can. But what if they're just not going there in the next week or two, or, you never see this happening? Like I said, you could stay or you could go. Freedom is, some people can't even conceive of not being in their primary relationship. When you go through that stage, it could feel like the dark night of the soul. It could be agonizing. But, we'll talk about that in the latter portion of the talk. Like, well, what happens if you just decide to leave? Because honestly, if that person cannot admit we have the same high intention, it's not going to last. I had in our school's history, a colleague who wanted to open a branch of our school. And we created a whole licensed other location. And then I started noticing the energy was off. So I just said, I'm not sure this really feels harmonious. I would just like us to find what is our highest intention. My highest intention is a loving, harmonious, successful relationship. Is that yours? And the person was actually said like, no. And I'm like, oh, I see what's happening. Over. Like, just done. I've had people say, oh my God, I can't believe how quickly you ended that. you don't have the same high intentions as me. You are not choosing love and harmony. We had a staff member who had we realized later, some kind of mental health disorder. And this person was rubbing other staff members improperly. And I heard about that. But soon as that came to me and I saw directly in one of my emails from this person, I was like, oh, wow, you're actually, like in my mind, I'm like, this person's mentally ill. And I just said, look, it needs to be loving and harmonious or it's not going to happen. I said, I will end this so quickly if it's not loving and harmonious. Sure enough, the next exchange, not at all loving and harmonious. And what they get from me? Radio silence forever. I'm not calling this person when I was talking about an idiot. I'm just giving you a quote. Don't argue with an idiot. Right? I heard myself saying the other day to someone, don't try to understand insanity. It's insane. So don't even try to understand it. So again, find your highest priority and insist that those in your life have the same highest intentions as you. You can't force anybody to do that. I'm just saying insist within yourself. Anybody in my sphere is loving and harmonious. If not, if I can't get rid of that person, I will keep working to bring it to that state. But that's all you can do, right? Is just keep working to bring it to peace and love. There's no other alternative. All right. Someone said, no names, but thank you everybody who's here and interacting. Hi, everyone. Let's like this live so this way Matthew message can be delivered for others to improve themselves as we are here now improving ourselves. Thank you. Not quite sure I understood all that, but thank you for your support. And again, welcome everybody who's here. All right, so that's a little bit about tip 2. Know your highest priorities, know techniques that can help get you there, insist that you always live from your highest intentions, and then through reflective listening, heart-to-heart communications, just start setting that intention in your teams and your family or whatnot. Next. 3, be willing. It kind of goes back to what we were saying before, but more about this. Be vulnerable and realize vulnerability is a good word. Whenever we're processing beliefs of a client, you'll hear things like worthless, not good enough, stupid, bad, vulnerable. Like, all right, let's reframe vulnerable. That's a good word. What do I mean by the goodness of vulnerability? Open-hearted, not having such thick skin that nothing can get through, right? You got walls, you got armor, and nobody's getting in. Be so thin-skinned that everything moves right through you. Nothing can touch you. Nothing can affect you because, again, you've done your inner work and you've cleared your own personal self. Who gets offended? Who gets aggressive? Who gets upset? Your ego. Only ego does that. That's okay. That's what ego does. But you're not your ego. That's a masquerading self. It's a false self. So in my book, Peace Under All Circumstances, one of the questions you're encouraged to ask is, am I coming from spirit or coming from ego? Spirit is vulnerable in the sense that it's actually invulnerable. I'm willing to be vulnerable because I know you can't hurt me. In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the Hindu scriptures, it says the soul, right, which is what you are, the true essence, the spirit, cannot be cut by weapons. It cannot be burned by fire. It cannot be withered by wind. It cannot be wet by water. It cannot be cut or burned. It cannot be wet or withered. So if you're immortal and eternal and invincible, right, are you programmed, I am an invincible force? Now, if you're not doing your own hypnotic programming, and you're going to start to, put this quote in there. I am an invincible force. So I'm willing to be very vulnerable. That doesn't mean you're not going to protect your body. We're actually going to talk about assertiveness training here. But if you're doing, next bullet point, opening the heart work, and if you're new to that on YouTube, you can type in Matthew Brownstein, opening the heart, and you'll see at least one, but I've done countless numbers of these talks on how to open your heart. So an open heart simply is where you stop suppressing your own emotions, stop pushing your stuff away. So, all right, I'm going to stop suppressing my anger. All right, but now I'm being told to have a heart-to-heart with the other person. So now what am I supposed to do? Vent my anger towards them, right? Matthew said, don't suppress. So I guess I need to express. You absolutely, if you don't know these teachings, the opening the heart teachings that I provide in our school, listen to those recordings because we've got toxic stuff in our heart, right? You're mad at your dad from 30 years ago, and your husband just pushed your button, and you're not going to suppress that anymore because you're now being open and vulnerable. So now you think you need to let that stuff out. Realize the pain in you don't want to let out towards someone else. There are teachings, and this talk tonight isn't about those, about how to clear the blocks in your own heart. It's only by staying open, radically open, that all of our blockages get clear. If you keep the protective walls up and you suppress and close down, you shield yourself, you don't get the intense spiritual growth which life can provide. Right? How do you create the best possible situation for spiritual growth? It was already created. It's called life. Right? You could think you're really enlightened until you get in a relationship, and then it really challenges you. Okay, so be willing to be open in that, to be vulnerable, to show that you can cry, that you can feel hurt. Once we practice this openness, it's really good, and we have training in our school. You could always learn more. Assertiveness training. So what does that mean briefly? In this idea that, okay, I'm going to stay, or I can't leave this relationship, you have the right to assert yourself. So these are statements like, I have the right to say no. I have the right not to be subjected to negativity. I have the right to put my needs first. Now, as we learn these principles, and those are 3 of 12 that I teach in the school, as you learn assertiveness principles, you realize, because your highest priority, because you are choosing to keep your heart open, because you're choosing really high standards of peace, love, and loving, harmonious relationships, then you also have the right to assert your rights as a spiritually aware human being, right? And just saying something like, I have the right not to be subjected to negativity, can really put a person in their place, right? Because you're holding these high standards and you're saying, look, it's loving and harmonious or it's not happening. That term, which a lot of people are not trained in, is assertiveness. It's important to understand that doesn't mean aggression. There's aggression and then there's assertiveness. Because my upbringing, whatever low self-esteem I had, I started trying to overcompensate with anger. But then when I learned assertiveness, I was like, oh, I've got the idea of my personal power kind of wrong. It's not anger that gets me what I want. It's my choice for inner peace, and then my right to assert that that's what I expect in my life and in my relationships. So staying really open gives you the greatest opportunity for growth. Again, you need to learn what to do with your emotions as they're coming up. But the main teaching is don't suppress them and don't vent them. Learn how to burn them away inside of you. You clearing your own blockages happens in the privacy of your own meditations or maybe in a good therapy session. But your significant other or your colleague or whomever, right, if this talk tonight you're thinking about, well, this is my coworker at work, the person's not your therapist. They're not necessarily even your friend, right? This is a colleague. So your anger towards them is your issue. But again, you're staying radically open, willing to be heart to heart, and then again, use I statements. When you didn't put the cap back on the toothpaste, it reminded me of my childhood and it made me really angry. The anger is mine. Yet I still need to talk to you about leaving the toilet seat up, right? Some things people are doing are inappropriate, but assertiveness training is the skill set to bring to the relationship. All right, next. Tip 4 on staying or maintaining the relationship. Again, I've been saying it, do your own inner work, but let's go a little deeper now to the if you spot it, you got it model. In New Age, or quite often self-actualized metaphysical philosophies, you will hear the idea of if you see it in them, you must have it in you. I believe there are 3 teachings in regard to that, and that this one is a half-truth. If you spot it, you got it. But what does that mean? Because there's value to the teaching, even though it might be a half-truth. If I think you're arrogant, I've got arrogance in me. If I think you're condescending, there's condescension in me. If I think you're stupid, I judge myself as stupid, right? If I spot it, I got it. That can be a huge part of what's going on, but it's not necessarily the only part. The other is for you to consider you actually don't have their issue. You're not doing what they're doing. But number two here about if you spot it, you got it. Number two is you have a strong charge against it, and that's the problem, right? Like leaving the cap off the toothpaste should not be the reason for major family crisis. Maybe that's just one of your buttons, and the husband, whoever, didn't put the cap on the toothpaste. He's the button pusher. What do you get rid of, the button pusher or the button? If you're wise, you get rid of your buttons, right? He can really push my buttons. What if he didn't have any buttons? Now, again, there are certain things that are appropriate, and you can use assertiveness training to say, honey, when you're strapping the child into the back seat in the car seat, you actually do have to use a seatbelt, right? It doesn't matter that you have charge against that as a child. That's a separate issue, right? Some things are just appropriate, right? Strap the kid in properly. And maybe that's where your assertiveness training comes in. But this is saying to do your own inner work, because the only person who really needs to heal in the relationship is you. The only person you have control over to heal is you. So number one, realize if you spot it, you got it, meaning, oh, he's irresponsible. Look at your own irresponsibility. Whenever you're judging someone else, right? Like, you know, that thing about pointing and then all the fingers point back at you. Like we could all remember that if you spot it in someone else, heal it in yourself. But let's say you're like, wow, I really don't have that issue. Then look for, do you have charge against it? Because once you desensitize that charge, it won't bother you anymore. And you'll be able to be far more rational and clear, and ideally coming from that higher spiritual place than if you are reactive. And the third thing, then I'll look at what you wrote in the chat pod there. One is if you spot it, you got it. Two is you probably have charge against it and you could clear that charge. And three is just see it as an opportunity for your growth, right? Either way, the situation is probably challenging you, and whether it's his issue or your issue, whatever, it's now your issue. So like what can you do? So the next line says, understanding people as mirrors, right? And really using this as a chance for growth. One of the models of what you can do is interpersonal hypnotherapy regressions. Essentially what we do there is we say, if I have a button, if I have charge in me about a certain issue, I can do a hypnotic regression back to the root cause. Quite often that is just childhood. I know a lot of you love past lives and that stuff is great. But we want to be a bit more down to earth quite often and say, you know, you're just responding to him because he reminds you of your dad, right? It's psychology 101. Right? You're being triggered because she reminds you of your mom. So do a regression, right? If you're a student in the school, you find a classmate, you find a colleague, you regress, you heal yourself, right? We have the skills to do that. So this is the reminder, whatever you're seeing in someone else is really most likely a mirror of something you can heal in yourself. But again, not always if you spot it, you got it. I had, in the history of the school, very few real incidents, but there's a husband of one of the students who was really not mentally well. And that lasted for a while with that person in our lives. And I had to constantly stop and say, I don't think I'm like that, but what is it? What is it in me? What could I share? Not that I'm blaming myself. I don't want to sound like you get neurotic, like, what did I do wrong? It's just more, life is offering me a lesson right now. Right? How can I shift that in me? Now, usually once we get the lesson, those people drop away. You may not have heard the term, the petty tyrant. Quickly, not talk about myself too much. When I lived in India, I had worked for someone else before, and that person decided to sue me. I'm in India, and I never had been in any kind of lawsuit, never have. So it's like, what do you mean? I'm going to have to come back to the United States because of this person? And I consulted with an attorney, and they're like, you did absolutely nothing wrong. This person is just being a petty tyrant. I'm like, oh, there's a new word. The petty tyrant is like the one person who shows up in your life that can just absolutely drive you nuts. And sometimes in a way where you really can't just run away from this. My experience during those times is you can absolutely consult with attorneys when necessary. But really, it's about deep soul searching within oneself. But again, not that neurotic, what did I do wrong? Go get a hypnotherapy session. Really, it's not always self-help. Sometimes a good solid regression to the root cause of that pattern. We're like, oh, that reminds me of this childhood bully or something. I see the petty tyrant is acting like my dad or that kid or whatever. And then by healing that in you, it doesn't mean they drop away right away. But when that part of you transforms, remember law of attraction, right? Law of like vibration, that you're going to have people who are vibrating at your level. So when I encountered that really low energy with, like I said, somebody who's connected to our school, and I didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, why is that kind of vibe there? Sure enough, I was able to discover some things in me that could have used more purification, more love, more light. And that just helped me to own that. All right. Someone said, what would be a loving response to someone who replies, well, I have a right to vent my anger and frustrations, when you tell them you have a right not to be subjected to negativity? Oh, I would just absolutely say, you absolutely have the right to vent your anger and frustration. Tell me more. What else do you want to say? Remember, don't meet force with force. Welcome it, because you're so thin-skinned, it's going to go right through you anyway. If you have no personal self in the way, it goes right through you. So I actually wouldn't stop someone. It depends on like when, right? At some point, it's like, okay, I've given you a chance to say everything you want to say. But if they want to vent anger and frustration, I go back to slide 1, which is bring it on. You know, like what else? Like in hypnotherapy, when we take someone through a regression and we're back in childhood and we're saying, okay, what's happening? All right, your dad's abusing you. What do you want to do? What do you want to say back? And you're like, eventually, I just want to hit him back. I want to scream. I want to yell at him. Okay, do it. And then we keep going in that cathartic emotional release until it is out of their system. It's important to remember negative emotion is a limited amount of stuff. It's not eternal. What's eternal is God, love, truth, peace. Again, whatever you call that reality. There is a reality that won't go away, and that's love. The anger, absolutely. So anger is just a call for love, right? This person being frustrated and angry is actually calling out for love. So what is the best thing you can do? Be love. Love doesn't attack. Love would listen. The person who's angry is suffering. They are calling out for love. Their anger is their own hurt. And realize when they're angry, it's because they're scared. And when they're scared, it's because they've been hurt. If you keep listening and just say, I hear that you're angry. I hear you're really frustrated. Tell me more. When we do that with a client, they say, well, I'm really frustrated because it's scary to think about this person keeps merging into my lane, and it's frustrating because he's going to cause an accident. Oh, you mean you're afraid of him? You're using anger as a defense, but it doesn't defend you. It actually attacks you. So realize the person who's angry is actually using the best resource they have in that moment. And what can you do except let them do that, knowing you're only pacing their reality so you can lead. So, okay, you told me you're angry. What's that all about? Tell me more. Well, I'm scared. I'm scared that, or, it really hurts when eventually you will hear underneath the anger, there's fear and hurt. Now, if they eventually get to, I'm angry because you hurt me. What you did was not okay. Then apologize. It doesn't mean you're agreeing that you did something wrong. It could be, I'm really sorry that when I didn't buy you roses or whatever, that you felt hurt. I can see why you feel hurt now that I've listened. I hear that you've been angry, right? It's those skills. Again, it's so easy to forget that and get into fancy techniques. Reflective, empathic listening, mirroring and matching. We didn't talk about tonight, but that's a powerful skill set. But really, you're pacing their reality. And yeah, not necessarily pulling out assertiveness training right away, because my experience, and we'll get to this slide actually, might be a long class, but one of the slides we're going to get to is about the surrender model, just letting go and trusting and just surrendering to life. Life has a way of harmonizing things. And when we buy into those principles, we seldom ever have to use assertiveness training. Okay, great. Thank you for that one. If the venting is on a multiple times a day basis. Well, again, I go back to the answer that I just gave. And if it just keeps going and it's just not stopping, at some point I'm usually just like, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. I can't give you advice on that because, that's a big deal. But I can just tell you in my own personal life, I've ended many relationships. And sometimes just by saying to the person, I'm really questioning if I want to be in this relationship, that can put a wrench in the spokes, right? And then that person realizes like, oh, this is not going the way I want to. Yeah, so we feel free to email if you want to get more specific about what's going on there. Okay, great. So yeah, let's move on. So that's a little bit on slide 4. Tip 4. Tip 5, A Course in Miracles and Ho'oponopono. If you're not using these techniques, I pretty much guarantee you have suffering in your life unnecessarily. So A Course in Miracles started when two people, Helen Schuckman and William Thetford, were in their place of business, medical psychology type of theme, and they realized this is disharmonious. I think it was their boss who said, there's got to be another way. The way we're going is not working. Because there was the willingness to find another way, the entire Course in Miracles came through Helen Schuckman. She didn't write it herself. The way the book describes the process was an openness to the Holy Spirit or divine mind to enter into their minds. If you haven't aligned yourself, let me get a drink. If you haven't aligned yourself with those principles yet, I guarantee you're suffering more unnecessarily. If you try to get into A Course in Miracles and you're like, I can't read this, it's like the Bible. Read a primer, read like a synopsis of the course. One of the best I recommend is Marianne Williamson's A Return to Love. You can listen to it in audiobook on YouTube, I believe, for free. Just get those principles in your head. Eventually, if you haven't already, I can't recommend enough, go through the workbook lessons. Again, we'll be spending all of August talking about A Course in Miracles. The idea is a shift can occur called the miracle. It's a shift from fear to love, from illusion to truth, from ego to spirit. That shift is the miracle. It happens in your mind. Only you need to accept that miracle for you. You don't have to try to force it on them, right? So one of our classmates here is talking about, well, what if this person's always yelling and frustrated? Apply A Course in Miracles lesson to yourself and ask for the miracle for yourself. Miracles are interpersonal, yet they're meant to be occurring inside of you naturally all the time. But if we don't know what that is, if we haven't developed that mental mechanism, then we're more antagonistic in our relationships than we realize. If you haven't studied habitual forgiveness, where it becomes natural to constantly let go, constantly forgive, then you have a lot more suffering than you realize. So I can't recommend enough that the next line, there's got to be a better way. There are other teachings like this, but again, A Course in Miracles came about because two people asked the question, there's got to be a better way. In A Course in Miracles, it says, above all else, I want to see. Above all else, I want to see things differently. I want to see things differently. When you're stuck in one point of view, then your worldview remains that way. It's very easy to shift your perspective. Like, let's say you're sitting in your backyard and you're looking up at your house. Well, that's what your backyard is. You see the house. But what if you turn around, instead of facing north, you face south? In a millisecond, you get a totally different worldview. In fact, you don't even see your house anymore. Now you're seeing the woods or whatever. A perception shift is radically changing the way you see the world. But if you don't know how to do that mentally, to shift from ego to spirit, again, I guarantee you're suffering a lot. So major tip is, if you're going to stay, study A Course in Miracles. Understanding forgiveness, I touched upon. Let's talk about that in relationship to Ho'oponopono. Again, teachings that if you don't know, you're probably suffering. These are ancient Hawaiian Huna tradition teachings, and it all comes about with the idea of taking total responsibility for your life situation. If there's anything out of harmony in your life, you have 4 basic things that you offer as a prayer. So the first one, there's sometimes in a different order, but the order I like is I'm sorry. First thing in your mind, at least, you're saying to the other person is, I'm sorry. And you can like kind of repeat it. I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I made this happen. I create my own reality. They're suffering. I'm sorry for doing that. Please forgive me. So number one, I'm sorry. Number two, please forgive me. Number three, thank you. And number four, I love you. Keep repeating that mantra. Now you know how to spell Ho'oponopono, so you can check it out on YouTube. Plenty of lectures and mantras and beautiful songs to the Ho'oponopono theme. I apply that to every relationship, any chance I get, whenever I need to, just, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. In A Course in Miracles, it says, the only thing I can earn is my gratitude. Meaning once you get to that place of, wow, God, thank you. Or again, however you say it, universe, thank you. That means like you got what you really wanted. You can get there internally before you even talk to this other person again. Just keep doing that in your own mind. You think of them, I'm sorry. I know you're really angry and frustrated. I'm sorry. It's not low self-esteem doormat syndrome. It's saying, I create my reality 100%. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Once it returns to gratitude and love in you, you are primed, as A Course in Miracles would call it, for a state of miracle readiness. In fact, the miracle's already occurred once you've really accepted forgiveness, gratitude, and love. So again, if you're not practicing Ho'oponopono in A Course in Miracles, you're suffering much more than you need to. All right. One of you said, A Course in Miracles is amazing. Thank you for recommending it. Yeah, right on, right? I feel like my life's work is consisting of four major things. Interpersonal hypnotherapy, like I'm giving the best I can. So interpersonal hypnotherapy is the best I know as far as facilitation work. The Anahat meditation system, the Life Mastery course, and A Course in Miracles. That's what we're all about in this institute. Not everybody gets into every teaching, right? But to me, those are the four best ones. And if you're not doing A Course in Miracles, you're definitely suffering more than you need to. Okay, let's talk about, we're going to be longer in this class, but take off if you'd like to. Tip one on leaving. So meaning if you're leaving the class or if you're leaving the relationship, or just ending the relationship, whatever that means. But I would suggest we never really end a relationship. Even if you get a divorce, even if you move away from the other person, they're still going to live in your mind, right? Relationships don't actually end. They're eternal. Sorry, but this is A Course in Miracles teaching that you're always in a relationship with everyone. It's just a question of what kind of relationship is it. Okay, so you're no longer husband-wife, but you're going to be, if you have a kid, you're going to be something to each other, right? So even if you never talk to that person again, realize they still live in your head. That's the idea of Ho'oponopono, that it's all you. Everything you're seeing is just a reflection of you. So what happens though if we decide to leave? Again, it goes back to prioritize yourself. Your spirituality, your mental, emotional health, your physical health are the highest priority. Once you prioritize that, and that's impetus for wanting to leave the relationship, it's like, this person, here's, let me say it this way. Yin and yang, whether that's man, woman, or yin, yin, or yang, yang, it doesn't matter. But the philosophy of Taoism is yin and yang are going to harmonize together. Now, sometimes this happens a lot in our school. Yin, or a woman, because we have more women than men who go through our school, yin starts vibrating at a higher frequency, right? So she's meditating, she's clearing her emotional block, she's raising her self-esteem, she's learning assertiveness, she's learning about love, real, true love. And then, he's still doing the beer and football thing, which is fine, right? But they're not at the same place. Metaphysical law in Taoism teaches that yin and yang either have to reharmonize or yin and yang are going to separate. If you're totally different vibrations and you've prioritized all that's good in you and the other person just isn't, you can try, hang around for a while, but eventually, if yin and yang are not harmonizing, yin and yang just separate. So they're either going to reharmonize, like he'll catch up, but if it's not happening, your high standards eventually just say, I'm moving on. Now, is there a grief and loss process involved? Sure, but that's another topic. But when you're the next bullet point is to heal yourself. When you get out of a relationship, I cannot recommend enough, don't get into another one, not for a while. she tells the story publicly, so our dear Orlando instructor and director, Renee Brent. She saw me as a private client when she was a student with us, and she went through a divorce, and I helped her to process, heal through that. And then she's like, oh, I want like another relationship. I'm like, just wait. Like, let's do a few more sessions. Eventually, she reminded me how the story went. She said, I told her, okay, Renee, now you're ready. I don't know what qualified me to say that or where she was at. But I'm like, okay, I guess she says. I told her she was ready. She used our formula, which I'll talk about tonight, the creating and manifesting formula, to pull into her life the person she wanted. And usually it happens within 2 weeks. You attract the right person. And now she's been with him ever since. He's a great guy. It ties into the last principle on this page. You have to be the right person to attract the right person. So when you get out of a relationship, remember, maybe you were vibrating higher, but you still got some healing to do from the relationship ending. But more important than that healing is take yourself to the next octave first. Really work on healing you. And even if that means being out of a relationship for a year, when a lot of these points are based on this idea of it's okay to be alone. You don't always have to be in a relationship. And again, we're talking about the bigger relationships now. If this is just firing an employee, then whatever. Not always easy, but it's not like, ending a marriage. So we're talking about kind of, the big relationships that end. Number one, realize you do have that choice almost all the time. And then if you really prioritize yourself, then your goal in not being in that relationship is not to find another one. It's to really heal yourself. So the next person you meet won't even be close to that vibration, but you just got out of that vibration. You've only been spiritually aware now for 3 months, right? Give yourself a good year of intense growth before you manifest the next person, because you have to be the right person to attract the right person. We'll come back to that topic. Number two, find fulfillment in yourself during this time off when you're not in a significant relationship. But again, tips for everyday living. Finding that love, the peace, the joy, the bliss, the wisdom inside of you. Like when you realize that physical intimacy, closeness with another person can never give you what divine love can give you, you've caught on to something huge. In A Course in Miracles, it says, revelation, when spirit is directly communing with you, is far more satisfying than any human relationship could ever give you. Right? So what we're looking for in these physical relationships, like I said earlier, is a feeling inside. If you're not in a relationship, find that feeling inside first. If you sit down on a meditation cushion, there's one right back there. There's like 3 or 4 around here. I'm always like daily on that cushion. If you can sit in a cushion, stillness, silence, solitude, and feel the most sublime bliss, something's wrong with you. If you can sit in a chair and just quietly sit there in the most profound peace, something's wrong. So what do you do? Next bullet point, it says self-care, but let's just jump to time alone and meditation. One of my teachers once, he said, and I think this is in another slide, he said there are no needs. Needs are not natural. The idea that you need something outside of you is a false belief. You are absolutely whole and complete within you. But if you find you hate to be alone, you're terrified of loneliness, what do? Go be alone. Don't be you might be afraid of being alone, but you sit through it until you restore yourself, or you allow yourself to be restored to wholeness. So when I first heard that teaching, I was like 20 years old or something. I was in college, and I was like, oh my God, but I'm supposed to be in a relationship, and it's weird, like if I'm just meditating in the woods alone. But I thought that was so weird at the time. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I took my tent, I went to a campground, and for the first time in my life, I camped alone. There were a man and a woman in the tent next to me making love, and I'm just sitting there going like, oh my God, poor me, and I don't have a woman in here, and I'm by myself, and I'm not here with friends. There's people partying and drinking, and I'm sitting in a tent by myself. Why would you do that? It was an investment to take the risk to say, maybe this teacher was right, that my inner state of being could be light and love and peace and joy and bliss. How long did I have to sit through my loneliness and sadness and depression for being alone? It actually didn't take very long. Within a month or 2, I had tapped into an ocean of love inside of me that never can go away. It might get clouded over sometimes, but I know it's always there. So be willing to take time alone in meditation, go walk in nature, go do some journaling. Don't be so dependent, right? We have the idea of codependency. Get really good at being alone. Then when you are in your next relationship, you will share in love and harmony. You won't be trying to get it from each other. Most of what the Course in Miracles calls special relationships, it's where the two people are both equally unfulfilled and they're trying to get it from each other. That relationship is secretly rooted in hatred. You know you're not okay without him. Like, let's say Harry and Sally. So Sally was always so lonely and sad, but then she met Harry and oh my God, he opened her heart. It felt wonderful. And now she falls in love with him. And she says the day that Harry dies, or the relationship ends, she said, I haven't felt that lonely and that sad since before I met Harry. What does that mean? She had a wound in her heart that wasn't okay. He helped make it feel better, but now he's gone and the wound is still there. If you're a spiritual seeker, you prioritize clearing the wound more than the relationship, actually. So, meaning, if you're whole and complete in you, the person you're going to be with will be whole and complete in themselves. Because again, like is going to attract like. Much better place to be if you're taking time out of a relationship. All right. Number 3, tip on leaving. Seriously, if you haven't done it, begin life mastery work. Yes, this is a plug for the upcoming workshop on Saturday. People who don't do this process, it just amazes me because it's so good. And if you want your life to be so good, it's an amazing process. I don't care if you do with me or not, but learn this type of thinking. The first portion of what we do in this process is called the getting organized process. And it helps you to get clarity of intent on everything that you want in your life. It's a very clear mental mapping. It can take months to actually go through the whole process. And then you can use it, I do, every day, and you do it for years. And the more you share it with others, the more your vision grows, your business grows, your relationships get better. I mean, you can create the most phenomenal life, better than you ever could imagine. But if you don't actually have a process to do that, then it can be super hard. Realizing if you're getting out of the relationship, you could be liberating yourself to create the most amazing future, right? So you might grieve a little, but grieving the old to make way for the new is quite often a really good formula. Once you get really clear on what you want, and in the relationship category, it says at the bottom, make a list of 100 qualities that you want in the other person. So relationship is only one life category of life mastery or self-actualization. But if you said, I want only loving and harmonious relationships, great. But when it comes to your significant other or like key staff members or whatever, make a list of these are all the qualities I want in this person. And if you got over your desperation and your fear of being lonely, you're willing to pass up or at least consider multiple suitors, right? Like if you're hiring for a job position, like which we're doing now in the school, interview a lot of people. Don't just, find the first person you meet and then say, oh, I think we have a connection. Like we should get married. Right? If you have a list of 100 qualities, you really want to hold those high standards by saying things like spiritually aware, financially secure, not morbidly obese, like, I don't know, whatever your standards are, but state them in the positive. And then again, you have to be the right person to attract the right person. So by having this list of the 100 qualities you want in another person, you actually make yourself become that person. And then you realize, wow, it is so much better to be this 100 quality awesome person. You can be so fulfilled in yourself, you'd hardly even care if someone's there or not. Then, whenever you're ready, to the bullet point above, the creating and manifesting process. Once you do that, everything we've been talking about, where you're really clear in yourself, within 2 weeks, pretty much, you will pull the person you want into your life. But it takes that time to invest in yourself first. Slide 4. Again, I think I'm being a little repetitive now. Learn to be alone. There are no needs. Meditate alone, like I talked about. Embracing silence and solitude is a beautiful thing. It's a really good thing. In Hermann Hesse's book, Siddhartha, he said, the main character said, I can think, I can wait, and I can fast. And the idea there is if you have those skill sets, like when COVID hit and everybody had to go into quarantine, I'm like, oh, I can think, I can wait, I can fast. I got this, right? People who can't just sit still and be alone, a lot of suffering. So again, super valuable if you're transitioning relationships. Learn to think, sit, wait, fast, right? Eventually, life keeps unfolding. And number 5, the surrender model. Trusting the universe to take care of the details and releasing attachment to the outcome. So a lot of what we tend to do is that ego self who has ideas of how to fix things and make things better. Surrender, where you're actually learning to let life lead, is an extremely powerful teaching. The idea like let go, let God. Instead of feeling like you're going to control the situation, you literally just offer it up in a prayer. But it's not just the relationship. It's learning to let every moment of your life be like you're a bobber floating on the ocean, but you're not thinking you're directing the flow, right? If there is something called the Tao, or really if there's something called God, right? If there is this divine intelligence or this universal love, this is just a reminder in closing to surrender your life to that, right? There's this idea of like my life, like how I want it to be, but then there's life, right? Life's life. What is life doing, right? Life has been doing this thing for a very long time. It'll keep doing this thing for a very long time. So one way to understand relationships is if you're going down a river, you could be paddling, but you could just put your paddles in the boat and just let the boat go down the river. All rivers lead to the ocean. Now, when you're going down the river, other boats will come near your boat. Sometimes they bump into you. Sometimes they're a little further apart. It'll happen. So if you let go of your personal self, relationships just happen. And the ones that are most harmonious tend to be the ones that come to you. So here's a principle on that. Don't go out to energies. Let energies come to you. So if you leave a relationship, start shining your light brighter, right? Meditate. Do all the things you do to be your absolute very best self. You will attract the right people to you effortlessly as you do that. People hear about the law of attraction, right? The secret, and we got to do dream boards. We got to visualize what we want. There's truth to all that, but the deeper teaching is all you have to do is vibrate at the highest level possible, and you will only attract that effortlessly anyway. So true surrender is where you actually get everything that you want by letting go and letting God, or just let the universe take care of the details. These things tend to harmonize. So you don't actually have to do the creating and manifesting formula to get in a relationship. Just trust that life brings the right people to you at the right time. Maybe it's going to be good for you to be alone for 5 years, right? But in A Course in Miracles, it says you don't know your own best interests. So you're either letting your ego run your life, and you can use the ego in the creating and manifesting formula, or you're letting spirit run your life. You're letting higher wisdom run your life. You're giving it over to God. I listened to Oprah, and I don't listen to Oprah much, but there was a really nice talk on YouTube, and she knows this stuff. She's like, my life became what it is because I let go. She read the book by Gary Zukov called The Seat of the Soul, and she caught on to this idea that I'm just an observer. I'm just along for the ride, and I'm just going to let life do its thing. Those who I've studied with, they like the real great teachers, they teach this stuff, right? Surrendering and letting go. And then your personal self doesn't even have to make a choice about being in a relationship or not, right? When you're floating in the ocean, other bobbers will come up and be with your bobber. Other times they won't. You're just letting the waves go up and down. And if you're alone, you're alone. If you're with others, you're with others. You don't like up any more than down, or down any more than up. It's just, I'm alone, I'm with others. I'm up, I'm down. It doesn't matter to you, right? So a beautiful quote is, there's no experience that's better or worse for the soul than any other experience. Either it's blissful and you're loving it, or it's challenging and you're going to grow from it. So who cares? Either way, you're going to win. All right, awesome. Let's see what anybody wrote here. All right, thank you for the thank yous. Seek ye the kingdom of God. within you, and all things will be added onto you. Right on. Thank you. So yeah, exactly. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven within you. I'll close with saying, as a reminder to everybody, and then feel free to open it up to any question, comments. In A Course in Miracles, it teaches heaven is a choice. It's a choice you must make. Nobody's going to enforce on you heaven because you can choose hell. My experience has been heaven and hell are not places. They're states of mind that manifest realities outside of us. So if inside of you is heaven, the outside will be heaven, and the people in your space will be heavenly. In A Course in Miracles, it talks about holy relationships, not special egoic relationships. In a holy relationship, where in your heart, you're like a sun shining 360 love. So I don't ever say really to anybody, I love you. What actually I end up saying is, you're in my space of love, therefore you're loved. Who does that apply to? Everyone, right? Why do you only love a few people? Why are you looking for that one special person? In A Course in Miracles, it says that's not how God intended relationships to be. So as one of our classmates said, seek the kingdom within you, find heaven in you. You will have people in your life, there might be marriage material, there might be sexual, whatever, but you don't care. You're just looking for the bliss inside of you, and then the right people will just come into your life. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Pretty glad you like the water references. Awesome. Any last questions you're sharing before I wrap it up for the night? So once again, Life Mastery Workshop this weekend coming up, and our next hypnotherapy training occurs on September 29th. If you're interested in A Course in Miracles and you haven't got in depth, we have a workshop towards the end of August coming up for A Course in Miracles. And again, all of August will be Course in Miracles based classes on these Monday nights. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate you all and wish you a wonderful evening.